My name is Juliana Hayes, though my father always called me Jules. At 29, I am a curator at a contemporary art gallery in New York City, a life of clean lines, sharp angles, and disciplined ambition, lived worlds away from the gentle, humid air of my childhood. I have made a name for myself in a city that rewards focus, but for the better part of a decade, my most demanding, unpaid role was as the emotional and financial backstop for my family in Charleston. Last month, that role came to a devastating end. After I arranged a memorial bench and a significant donation in my father's name for his favorite historic park, I arrived at his funeral, only to be met by my stepmother Delia's whisper-thin smile and her words to the usher. "Please see that Miss Hayes is seated appropriately. She prefers to be discreet." I was led to the back, an observer at the funeral of the man who was my entire world. Later, at the reading of his will, she blocked my path to the boardroom with a theatrical sigh, saying, "Darling, this part is just for family. I'll call you." She had no idea that my father's true last words were tucked safely in my satchel, waiting for their moment. When my lawyer finally opened that file, Delia's carefully constructed world turned to ash. This is not a story of revenge, but of reclamation, of reclaiming a father's true legacy, and in doing so, finally reclaiming myself. To grow up a Hayes in Charleston was to be raised in the embrace of history, in a house south of Broad Street with piazza doors that opened to the scent of jasmine and salt marsh. Our home was a testament to my father, Marcus Hayes, an acclaimed historical architect who didn't just build structures, but resurrected stories from wood and brick. It was a world of quiet grace, but also of unspoken sorrows. After my mother, Anna, died of a swift and sudden aneurysm when I was 14, the vibrant colors of our life seemed to fade to sepia tones. It was just Dad and me then, two solitary ships navigating the vast ocean of our grief. He was my compass and my anchor. Despite the demands of his firm, Hayes Preservation and Design, he carved out time for me that was sacred. Our ritual was the Sunday morning walk. We'd leave the house just as the sun was casting a golden glow on the cobblestones and stroll along the Battery, watching the sailboats drift toward Fort Sumter. He'd listen, truly listen, to my tangled teenage anxieties with a deep, patient stillness, his wisdom as enduring as the live oaks that lined our path. "Jules," he'd often say, his eyes on the horizon, "your mother had a gift for seeing the truth in people. A kind of inner compass. You have it, too. Never let anyone convince you to ignore it." When I was 19, a sophomore studying art history at NYU, Dad met Delia Thorne at a Preservation Society gala. She was beautiful, with the polished poise of a woman accustomed to admiration, and she seemed to hang on his every word about wrought iron and heritage woodworking. After 5 lonely years, I was desperate for him to find happiness. I wanted to believe in her. But Delia came with her own history, a son, Finn, who was 17, and a daughter, Sloane, a year younger than me. From the moment I met them, my inner compass spun frantically. Their smiles were too bright, their praise for Dad's work too effusive. Their eyes, however, were cool and appraising, cataloging the value of the antique silver and the heirloom portraits. Still, for Dad's sake, I tried. I took Sloane to lunch at a little cafe on King Street and tried to talk about art. I asked Finn about his passion for boating, hoping to find common ground. Their responses were polite, but impenetrable, like beautiful, locked doors. "They just need time, Jules," Dad would assure me over the phone, his voice filled with a hope I couldn't bring myself to share. "They've had a rough go. Their father left them years ago. It's not easy." The wedding was a swift, elegant affair 6 months later, held in the garden of a historic plantation on the Ashley River. I stood by my father's side, the scent of magnolias thick in the air, and listened to Delia promise a lifetime of faithfulness and support, her words feeling as fragile as spun glass. The changes to our home began almost immediately. The first to go was the small, candid photo of my mother, laughing on the beach that had always sat on the mantel. It was replaced by a formal, studio portrait of Delia. Soon, other photos, other mementos, were carefully stored in the attic to make way for abstract art and sleek, modern furniture that felt alien in the gracious, old rooms. Our Sunday walks became a rarity. Delia developed a talent for scheduling brunch with influential couples or insisting that, as a family, they all needed to attend Finn's sailing regattas. When Dad and I did manage to escape, my phone would buzz with texts from Delia about a leaky faucet or a crisis with the caterer for her upcoming luncheon. The emergencies always evaporated the moment Dad returned home. Finn and Sloane, meanwhile, settled into their new life with an air of entitlement. Finn ran Dad's prized motorboat aground in the Intracoastal Waterway, and Dad quietly paid for the extensive repairs. Sloane developed a taste for designer boutiques, and the credit card bills she racked up were paid without a word. I chose a different way. Though Dad offered me a generous allowance, I insisted on paying my own way through college and grad school, patching together scholarships, loans, and a part-time job cataloging prints at a small Soho gallery. It wasn't about rejecting his help. It was about holding onto a piece of myself that felt solid and earned. "You're just like your mother," Dad would say, a proud, sad smile in his eyes. Stubbornly independent. After I finished my master's and landed the curatorial position, the distance between New York and Charleston felt both vast and necessary. We spoke on the phone every day, but during my quarterly visits, I began to see a change in him. The light in his eyes seemed dimmer, his brilliant mind a little less sharp. When I'd voice my concerns, Delia would dismiss them with a wave of her hand. "Oh, Juliana, don't be so dramatic. Your father is simply getting older. It happens to all of us." In the last year, his decline steepened. A heart condition was diagnosed, and his once strong frame grew frail. During my visits, I noticed a revolving door of new medications on his nightstand, and he often seemed confused, lost in a fog. My last clear conversation with him was 3 months ago. He'd asked Delia to fetch him some tea, and the moment she left the room, his hand, surprisingly strong, gripped mine. "Jules, listen to me," he'd whispered, his eyes wide and urgent. "I've been making arrangements, setting things right. If something happens, you talk to Evelyn Reed at the office. She'll have something for you. Promise me." Before I could ask what he meant, Delia glided back in, a cup and saucer in her hand. "Here you are, darling. Time for your afternoon pills." Her smile was meant for him, but the look she shot me was glacial. That was the last time I truly spoke to my father. My daily calls were increasingly intercepted by Delia, who would report that he was resting comfortably or not up to talking. The few times I did get him on the line, his voice was thick and distant. I was planning to fly down, unannounced, the following weekend. I never got the chance. The call came late on a Wednesday. I was in my office, writing wall text for a new exhibition, when Finn's name flashed on my screen. He never called me. "It's Dad," he said, his voice flat. "He's at MSC. Mom said I should let you know." My world tilted on its axis. What happened? Is he going to be okay? I don't know. Mom has the details. He hung up. The flight to Charleston was a 5-hour purgatory of anxiety and unanswered questions. I landed in the soupy, pre-dawn humidity and took a taxi straight to the Medical University of South Carolina Hospital. In the waiting room of the cardiac intensive care unit, I found them, Delia, Finn, and Sloane, looking like a portrait of concerned waiting. Delia, even at this hour, was perfectly put together. "Delia, what's going on? How is he?" I asked, my voice trembling. She rose gracefully, placing herself between me and the hallway to the patient rooms. "Juliana, you really didn't have to fly all this way. He's my father. I had to come. I need to see him." Her expression hardened, a mask of sympathetic steel. "The doctors are being very strict. Immediate family only. Robert is in a delicate state. He can't handle any emotional stress. The words were a physical blow. I am his immediate family. Of course, darling, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. But the doctors defined it as the people living in his household. It's for his own good. We'll be sure to call you with any updates. Sloane had the grace to look down at her phone, but I saw the flicker of a smirk on Finn's face. I went to the nurse's station, my heart pounding with a mixture of grief and rage. I explained who I was. The charge nurse looked from me to Delia and back again, her face a mixture of confusion and a desire to be anywhere else. His wife is his medical proxy, she said helplessly. She's given us a list of approved visitors. Hours passed. I watched Delia and her children come and go, their faces arranged in masks of solemn concern. Finally, a young, tired-looking doctor approached me. He listened to my story with sympathy. Your father's condition is critical, he said gently. He's heavily sedated. I can allow you a brief visit, but I doubt he'll be aware you're there. A wave of relief so intense it made me dizzy washed over me. But as the doctor started to lead me down the hall, Delia intercepted him. Their conversation was a low murmur, but I saw Delia's hand on his arm, her expression one of earnest, persuasive concern. When the doctor returned to me, his face had changed. I'm very sorry, Miss Hayes, he said, his voice now formal. Mrs. Hayes has informed me that your father's pre-admittance directive was very clear, no visitors who might cause him distress. Given the family dynamics, she has invoked her right as his proxy to restrict visitation to herself and her children. My hands are tied. That's a lie, I choked out. He would never, ever do that. I'm sorry, he said again, and this time he wouldn't meet my eyes. When I refused to leave, arguing my case with rising desperation, a hospital security guard was quietly summoned. I was escorted from the cardiac unit, the humiliation of burning fire in my chest. For 3 days, I laid siege to the hospital. I called, I waited in the lobby, I tried to reason with every nurse and administrator I could find. It was useless. Delia had built an impenetrable wall. On the 4th day, as I was sitting numbly in the hospital cafeteria, a young nurse sat down opposite me. You're Juliana Hayes, aren't you? She asked in a low voice. I nodded. I'm Camila. I'm one of your father's night nurses. I shouldn't be doing this, but this whole situation feels wrong. He's been asking for you. My head shot up. He's awake? Delia said he was unconscious. Camila shook her head. He drifts in and out. But a few times he's been lucid. Last night he whispered your name. Jules. He kept saying it. Tears blurred my vision. Can you get me in? Please? I'll try, she said, her eyes darting around the cafeteria. Come to the 4th floor entrance tonight at 2 a.m. The shifts are changing, it's chaotic. I can't promise anything, but maybe I can get you a few minutes. That night, I sat in my hotel room, watching the clock, a fragile hope fluttering in my chest. At 5:45 a.m., before I could even leave for the hospital, my phone rang with an unknown number. Miss Hayes? This is Dr. Alastair, from MUSC. I'm so sorry to have to tell you this, but your father passed away peacefully about 30 minutes ago. The world went silent. The air left my lungs. He was stable. He was asking for me. He suffered a sudden, massive coronary event. The doctor's voice continued, a distant buzz in my ears. We did everything we could. I'm so terribly sorry for your loss. I never got to say goodbye. Delia had made sure of it. The funeral was a performance, orchestrated and directed by Delia. It was held at St. Michael's, one of Charleston's most venerable churches, a place my father admired for its architecture, but had never attended. When I arrived, an usher, clearly briefed, led me to a pew in the very back, behind rows of Delia's friends and distant relatives I'd never met. I watched as my father's oldest friends and business partners offered their condolences to the grieving widow in the front row, many of them glancing back at me with confusion and sympathy. Delia's eulogy was a masterpiece of fiction, painting a portrait of a sainted wife who had selflessly nursed her ailing husband and a beautifully blended family torn apart by his tragic passing. She never mentioned my mother. She never said my name. After the service, at the reception at the Carolina Yacht Club, I overheard Delia speaking with her attorney, a slick man named Franklin Croft. "We'll proceed with the reading on Wednesday," he murmured. "Everything is in order." "Excellent," Delia replied, a hint of steel beneath her sorrowful tone. Marcus was very clear in his final wishes. "I intend to honor them completely." The smug finality in her voice was a physical blow. I left without a word, the familiar Charleston streets feeling alien and hostile through my tears. I was utterly alone, defeated. My father was gone, and Delia had erased me from his life, and now from his death. That night, I cried until I was empty, a hollowed-out shell of the woman I had been just a week before. I didn't know it yet, but my father had left me one last message, one final tool to reclaim the truth. I spent the next 3 days in a fog of grief, haunting the quiet streets of my childhood. I had taken an indefinite leave from the gallery, the sharp, demanding world of New York art feeling like a lifetime away. One afternoon, a knock came at my hotel room door. I opened it to find Evelyn Reed, my father's office manager for over 20 years. Her kind, wrinkled face was etched with worry. "Evelyn? What is it?" "May I come in, Juliana?" she asked, clutching her oversized handbag. "I can't be seen talking to you." Inside the room, she pulled a thick manila envelope from her bag. It was sealed with a wax stamp bearing the Hayes family crest, a design my father had created. "Marcus gave this to me about 6 months ago," she said, her voice trembling slightly as she handed it to me. "He said if anything were to happen, I was to deliver it to you, and only you. In person." He was very clear that no one else was to know of its existence. My hands shook as I took the heavy envelope. Did he say anything else?" Evelyn shook her head. "Only that it was of the utmost importance and that you would know what to do with it." She glanced at her watch. "I have to go. Delia has been a presence at the office, going through everything. She let go of 2 of the junior architects yesterday." After she left, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the envelope. It felt like a direct line to my father, a final conversation I was both desperate for and terrified of. With a deep breath, I broke the seal. Inside were 3 things: a long, handwritten letter on my father's personal letterhead, a sealed legal document from a law firm I didn't recognize, Sinclair and Associates, and a small, antique brass key, taped to an index card bearing the address of a private vault company. I unfolded the letter first. "My dearest Jules, if you are reading this, I am gone and I am so profoundly sorry. Sorry for the pain of my absence, and even more sorry for the circumstances I fear have led to it. I made a mistake, Jules. A terrible, blind mistake in trusting Delia. This past year, I have felt myself fading. My thoughts grow foggy, my strength wanes. And I have seen things. Small things at first. Documents moved on my desk. Friends' calls not returned. Prescriptions that make me feel worse, not better. I hired a private investigator. I had to know. The man Delia claimed had abandoned her and her children. They never divorced. It was all a sham. I have enclosed his findings in a safe place for you. I have also drawn up a new will. Delia knows nothing of it. The enclosed document is a copy. It reflects my true wishes. The key opens a private vault. Inside, you will find the evidence you may need if, as I suspect, Delia tries to contest the will. It also contains some personal things of your mother's, that I could not bear to see lost. My plan was to confront her, to dissolve the marriage, but my health failed me more quickly than I anticipated. I fear I am running out of time. Please know this, Juliana. You were the great, shining light of my life. Your mother and I looked at you the day you were born, and we knew you were something special. She would be so incredibly proud of the woman you've become. Trust your compass. It will see you through. All my love, forever. Dad. I sat there, the letter clutched in my hand, tears of grief and searing vindication blurring my vision. He had known. He had fought for me, for us, until the very end. The next morning, I went to the vault. The box was heavy. Inside, alongside a velvet pouch containing my mother's jewelry, was a meticulously organized file. There were surveillance photos of Delia meeting with her ex-husband, James Thorne. Financial records showing transfers from my father's accounts to a corporation owned by Thorne. Copies of Dad's medical charts, with his own shaky notes in the margins questioning the dosage of his heart medication. And a thumb drive containing audio recordings from my father's study. I clicked on one file and heard Delia's voice, smooth as silk. He's getting suspicious, James. We need to accelerate the timeline. His daughter is visiting next month, and I can't have her interfering. The cold, calculated evil of it stole my breath. This wasn't just greed. It was a methodical, patient execution. I packed everything carefully back into my satchel. My father had given me a roadmap. Now, I just had to follow it. The day of the will reading, I arrived at the law offices of Croft and Partners on Broad Street 5 minutes early. Delia's old friend, Walter, my father's former lawyer, had called to give me the details, his voice thick with anger. Marcus would never have cut you out, Juliana. This stinks to high heaven. I announced myself to the receptionist. Her eyes widened in surprise. I'm sorry, Miss Hayes, but you're not on the appointment list. I'm aware, I said, my voice calm and steady. I am Marcus Hayes's daughter. I will be present for the reading of his will. After a flustered phone call, Franklin Croft himself emerged. He was a man who used expensive tailoring and feigned sincerity. Miss Hayes, this is irregular. The reading is a private matter for the beneficiaries. I am his next of kin, I stated, not moving. I have a right to be here. Or we can have this discussion in front of a probate judge. Your choice. He sighed, a flicker of annoyance crossing his smooth features. Very well. This way. The air in the conference room was thick with tension. Delia, flanked by Finn and Sloane, stared at me as if I were a ghost. Her brother, a man with the same predatory eyes as his sister, stood behind her. What is the meaning of this intrusion? Delia demanded, addressing Croft but staring at me. Miss Hayes has asserted her right to be present, Croft said smoothly. Delia let out a long, martyred sigh. Fine, but this meeting is for the heirs named in the will. A category, I'm afraid, that does not include Juliana. Her confidence was absolute, chilling. I am here to honor my father's last wishes, whatever they may be, I said, taking a seat at the far end of the long mahogany table. Croft began to read from the will, dated the previous January. It was exactly as I'd expected. The entire estate, the historic home, the architectural firm, the investment portfolios, the beach house on Kiowa Island, a total value of nearly $15 million, was left to his beloved wife, Delia Hayes. Her children, Finn and Sloane, were named as secondary beneficiaries. When he finished, Delia placed a hand to her chest, a perfect picture of a grieving, grateful widow. Marcus was so generous, she murmured. He always put his family first. Are there any questions? Croft asked, already beginning to gather his papers. I stood up. Actually, yes. I have one. I walked to the head of the table and placed the sealed envelope from Sinclair and Associates in front of him. I believe you're reading from an outdated document. Delia shot to her feet. This is absurd. What is that? Croft picked up the envelope, his brow furrowed. He examined the seal, his professional curiosity piqued. This appears to be a legal document from a reputable firm. It is my father's final will and testament, I said, my voice ringing with a clarity that surprised me. Executed 6 months ago and filed with the Charleston County Probate Court. Delia's face, for the first time, lost its composure. A flush of angry color rose in her cheeks. It's a forgery. He was ill. He wasn't in his right mind. She manipulated him. Croft ignored her, carefully slitting the envelope. He read the first page, then the second. His face grew pale. He looked at Delia, then at me. He cleared his throat. "This document," he said, his voice now strained, "does appear to be a legally executed will. It contains a clause explicitly revoking all prior wills. If it is authenticated, it supersedes the document I have just read." "Then read it," I said, my voice quiet. He began to read. The room was utterly silent, save for the rustle of the paper. The new will was my father's true voice. It provided for Delia and her children with carefully structured trusts, enough for a comfortable life, but with no control over the principal. The house on South Battery was to be placed in a trust to become a museum and study center for historical architecture, managed by a board I would oversee. His shares in the firm, the bulk of his liquid assets, and his personal effects were left to me. But the final clause was the one that landed like a grenade in the silent room. Croft's voice faltered slightly as he read it. "In the event that my death is deemed to be premature or to have occurred under suspicious circumstances, I direct my executor, my daughter Juliana Hayes, to use the full resources of my estate to pursue a complete and thorough investigation, to include a full toxicological analysis and a review of all medical care I received in the final year of my life." Delia's face was a mask of pure, murderous rage. "It's a lie," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "He loved me. That ungrateful wretch has poisoned you all against me." "Mrs. Hayes," Croft said, holding up a hand. "I must advise you." But I was the one she was looking at now. "This isn't over, Juliana," she spat, her voice a low, venomous promise. "I know," I said, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I think it's just beginning." She grabbed her purse and stormed from the room, her children trailing in her wake like bewildered goslings. The room was silent. Croft finally looked at me, a dawning respect in his eyes. "Miss Hayes," he said, "it seems I owe you an apology. Your father was a very thorough man." "Yes," I said, a deep, aching sadness mixing with my resolve. "He was." The battle wasn't over, but my father had given me the one thing I needed most, the truth. The weeks that followed the will reading were a maelstrom. Delia, true to her word, fought back with the ferocity of a cornered animal. She refused to vacate the house, changed the locks, and filed a motion to contest the will, her new, high-priced lawyer claiming I had exerted undue influence over my ailing father. The local gossip columns had a field day with the story of the warring widow and the disinherited then re-inherited daughter. I hired my own attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense Charlestonian named Beatrice Sinclair, the very woman who had drafted my father's final will. Marcus was lucid, angry, and deeply afraid when he came to me, told me during our first meeting. He knew he was being isolated, and he was taking steps to fight back. "This evidence he collected," she said, looking at the contents of the safety deposit box spread across her conference table, "is our bombshell." The threats began as anonymous texts, then escalated. My hotel room was broken into, a clear message of intimidation. But Delia had miscalculated. Each act of aggression only strengthened my resolve. The turning point came from the most unexpected of sources. Finn called me, his voice strained. "Meet me at the park on Colonial Lake." Alone. Wary but intrigued, I agreed. He looked terrible, his usual swagger gone, replaced by a haunted, hollow-eyed exhaustion. "Mom's losing it," he said, not meeting my eyes. "She's burning papers in the fireplace at night. Talking to herself. And she's been talking to James. Her ex. A lot. He's been telling her to hold the line, that they've come too far to lose now." He finally looked at me. "Robert was good to me, Juliana. He taught me how to navigate by the stars. He was more of a father to me than my own ever was. I can't be a part of this anymore. Whatever you need to know, I'll tell you." His confession, followed by a tearful, similar one from Sloane a few days later, gave me the leverage she needed. Armed with their testimony and my father's meticulous evidence, she filed a motion with the court. The hearing was a short, brutal affair. When confronted with the audio recording of her plotting with James Thorne, and with her own son's testimony, Delia's composure finally, irrevocably shattered. The judge not only upheld my father's final will but, citing the overwhelming evidence of fraud, conspiracy, and potential elder abuse, referred the entire case to the district attorney's office. Criminal charges were filed against both Delia and James Thorne. The lurid details of their long con, including the revelation of a first husband who had also died of a sudden heart condition, made national news. The legal battle would drag on for years, but for me, the war was over. 6 months later, spring had returned to Charleston. The air was soft again, fragrant with wisteria. I had moved back into the house on South Battery, the process of clearing out Delia's cold, modern artifacts and restoring my father's warm, history-filled aesthetic a form of healing in itself. The Anna Hayes Foundation for Historic Preservation was now a reality, its offices housed in the restored carriage house. I established tentative, careful relationships with Finn and Sloane. They were adrift, grappling with the enormity of their mother's deception. I used a portion of the estate to set up educational trusts for them, knowing it was what my father, in his boundless generosity, would have wanted. One Sunday morning, I found myself walking along the Battery, the early light turning the harbor to gold. I stopped at the memorial bench I'd had installed, its simple bronze plaque reading, Marcus Hayes. He saw the beauty in what endures. Sitting there, I thought about the journey of the past year. The grief was still a part of me, a quiet current beneath the surface, but it was no longer a storm. It had been joined by a profound sense of peace. The fight had not been about money, it had been about truth. It had been about ensuring that the story of my father's life, his kindness, his integrity, his love, was the one that endured. My father's last gift to me wasn't his fortune. It was the reminder to trust my own inner compass. It had been a long and turbulent voyage, but it had finally led me back to myself, to a place of quiet strength and hard-won peace. Looking out at the water, I felt him there with me, not as a ghost, but as a steadying presence, a part of the enduring beauty all around me. And, for the first time in a very long time, I felt truly home.